The sun was high and harsh over Dusty Creek, a small frontier town where the wind carried dust like tiny dancers across the wooden streets. In the heart of the town stood a saloon, its swinging doors rattling with every passerby. Inside, the air smelled of strong coffee, old wood, and the faint tang of gunpowder. Cowboys and travelers huddled around tables, playing cards, sipping whiskey, or talking in low voices about the rumors of the West. Jack McAllister sat in a corner, a quiet figure with calm eyes and a steady hand. Known across the region as Quick Shot, he had earned his reputation through skill and patience rather than recklessness. He polished his rifle with care, a curious glint in his eyes as he worked. The rifle was famous not for its size but for its clever mechanism that allowed it to fire faster and more powerfully than any ordinary gun. People said it grew twice its fire, though few had ever seen it in action. The saloon doors swung open with a sharp creak and the chatter inside dimmed. A woman stepped in, her presence immediately drawing attention. She was tall, confident, and moved with an elegance that seemed almost out of place in the dusty town. Her clothes were neat but practical, an adventurer's style rather than a lady's dress. Her eyes scanned the room quickly, sharp and curious until they landed on Jack. She walked straight to his table, boots tapping lightly on the wooden floor. Every head in the saloon turned and whispers began to ripple through the crowd. "Show me your rifle," she said, her voice firm yet intrigued. "The one that grows twice its fire, cowboy." Jack looked up, mildly amused. He had faced many challenges in his life, gunfights, outlaws, even wild animals. But few people demanded something with such curiosity and boldness. He measured her with a calm gaze, noticing the spark in her eyes. This was not a fool or a thief. She was someone who wanted to understand, to see skill and ingenuity for herself. "I don't usually show it off," Jack said slowly, "but I can explain why it's called that. It's not magic. It's clever engineering." The woman raised an eyebrow. "Clever engineering in a gun? I've traveled far, cowboy, and I've never seen anything that could match the rumors. I want to see it in action. High noon outside if you dare." The room went silent. A few cowboys laughed nervously, thinking this was just a game or a test of courage. Others leaned in, eager to witness what might happen. Jack felt a quiet thrill. He had always believed that skill and preparation were better than bragging. But now someone had come along who could truly appreciate it. "You'll have your demonstration," he said finally, standing and slinging the rifle over his shoulder. "But don't think this is a trick. You'll see exactly how it works." The woman nodded. "I'm not here for tricks. I want truth. And maybe a little excitement." As Jack stepped outside, the sun hit the town square like a golden hammer. Dust swirled in lazy spirals, kicked up by a soft breeze. People gathered slowly, sensing something unusual. Merchants paused at their stalls, children peeked from behind wagons, and the occasional horse stamped nervously on the ground. Jack placed his rifle on a wooden post and began to explain. "See, it's not the bullet that matters most. It's the way the mechanism allows each shot to follow faster, and with more precision. I designed it so that it can handle pressure without losing control. Watch closely." He demonstrated the first few shots. The bullets were fast, each one hitting its target with uncanny accuracy. The townsfolk murmured, amazed at the speed and power. The woman watched intently, leaning forward, her eyes narrowing in concentration. She wasn't just impressed, she was calculating, analyzing. "You've got skill," she said finally, her voice low enough that only Jack could hear. "And your rifle, it's clever. But skill alone doesn't tell the whole story. I want to see how it performs when everything is uncertain." Jack smiled faintly. "You might get your chance sooner than you expect." At that moment, the edge of town stirred. A group of riders appeared, dust trailing behind them. They weren't ordinary travelers. These were rough men, faces hidden under wide-brimmed hats, hands hovering near their weapons. Jack recognized them immediately as trouble, outlaws who had been raiding nearby towns. The woman noticed them too, her expression sharpening. "They don't look like they're here for a friendly visit," she murmured. Jack's eyes followed the riders, and his calm demeanor didn't falter. "They want distraction," he said, "and a prize." Without panicking, he checked his rifle and adjusted his stance. Evie, as the woman introduced herself, stepped beside him. "I can help," she said. "I've handled tight situations before. We don't need to wait for trouble to reach us." Jack studied her. There was confidence there, not recklessness. He nodded. "Then we prepare. But remember, precision is key. Don't act without thought. The townsfolk began to scatter, sensing danger. Merchants closed their shops and children were hurried to safety by anxious parents. The riders slowed as they approached, curious about the gathering in the main square. Jack's rifle gleamed in the sunlight, a promise of power and protection. Evie's eyes didn't leave the riders, her mind racing with strategies and possibilities. They weren't allies yet, but there was a shared understanding between them, a recognition of courage and intelligence. The first outlaw stepped forward, a sneer on his dusty face. Well, looks like we found a little show before our real fun, he shouted. The others laughed, spurring their horses forward, eager to cause chaos. Jack stayed calm. He raised his rifle, but not to shoot yet. His goal was to control the moment, to set the stage. "Stay back," he called to the riders, his voice steady. "There's no need for trouble if you leave now." The outlaw laughed again, waving his hand dismissively. But then he noticed the precision of Jack's posture, the glint of the rifle and the calm determination in Evie's eyes. A flicker of doubt crossed his face. Evie stepped slightly forward. "You don't know who you're messing with," she said quietly but firmly. "This town isn't as easy as it looks." The riders hesitated, sensing that these two were not ordinary townsfolk. The crowd murmured, tension thick in the air. Dust rose like smoke from the main street as the wind shifted. Jack's rifle rested in his hands, ready to prove its reputation, but he didn't fire yet. He understood the power of timing, the value of patience. For a few long moments, the town held its breath. Cowboys gripped their hats, merchants clutched their doors, and even the wind seemed to pause. Then slowly the outlaws backed away, realizing this wasn't an easy target. Jack lowered his rifle slightly, but did not relax completely. Evie exhaled, a faint smile on her lips. "Not bad for a first impression," she said. Jack chuckled softly. "Not bad at all. But the real test comes at high noon. Are you ready for that?" Evie nodded, her eyes bright with curiosity and excitement. "I've waited for a challenge like this for a long time. Don't disappoint me, cowboy." As the sun climbed higher, the town settled into an uneasy calm. People returned to watch, curious about what would happen next. The tension of the coming demonstration hung in the air like a storm cloud, and everyone knew that the quiet before high noon would not last long. Jack and Evie walked side by side, not as friends yet, but as allies bound by respect and shared purpose. Each step echoed in the wooden streets, carrying the weight of expectation. The sun blazed, the wind whispered secrets, and the town held its collective breath, waiting for the moment when the rifle that grew twice its fire would prove its legend, or when chaos would descend upon Dusty Creek. And in that moment, both Jack and Evie understood something unspoken. The Wild West was not kind to the unprepared, and skill, courage, and intelligence were the only shields against the unknown. The clock struck high noon and the sun hung like a blazing coin over Dusty Creek. The town square was alive with tension. People lined the edges of the street, some perched on barrels, others hiding behind wagons, all eager to witness the legendary rifle in action. Jack McAllister stood in the center, rifle ready, his calm eyes scanning the crowd and the quiet horizon beyond. Beside him, Evie Monroe adjusted her stance, her mind sharp and alert, ready for whatever came. The outlaws, hidden just beyond the hills, watched the scene unfold. They were a rough, ragged group, used to fear keeping towns under their control. But now uncertainty replaced confidence. Something about Jack and Evie made them hesitate. They were clearly not ordinary townsfolk, and the rifle was no ordinary weapon. Jack raised his rifle and aimed at a distant target, a small wooden post near the edge of the town square. "Watch closely," he called to the crowd, his voice calm and steady. He fired. The bullet hit the post with precision, splitting a knot in the wood. A murmur of admiration rose from the spectators. Evie nodded, impressed. "Clever mechanism," she whispered. "Twice its fire." They weren't exaggerating. Jack lowered the rifle slightly. "This is just the beginning." Before he could continue, the outlaws decided to make their move. A rider burst into the street from the east, hooves pounding against the wooden planks. Shouts echoed as the others followed, brandishing their weapons, eyes wild with intent. The town erupted in panic. Merchants ducked behind counters, children squealed and were pulled to safety, and townsfolk tried to make themselves small. Jack's eyes narrowed. He didn't panic. He had trained for moments like this. Evie stayed calm beside him, quickly assessing the situation. "We need to control the street, not just react," she said. Jack nodded. He lifted his rifle, firing with precision. Each shot was quick, accurate, and calculated. Bullets struck in rapid succession, forcing the outlaws to halt and rethink. The sound of the rifle echoed like thunder across the square, each shot carrying the unmistakable power of the twice-its-fire mechanism. Evie acted too. She moved swiftly, helping townsfolk out of harm's way and creating barriers using barrels, benches, and even the overturned carts. Her mind worked like a strategist, turning chaos into manageable zones, keeping everyone safe while Jack focused on precision shots. One outlaw, bolder than the rest, charged straight toward Jack. The cowboy's eyes followed the movement, anticipating every step. With a calm breath, he fired, the bullet striking just in time to knock the man off balance without causing serious harm. Evie stepped in, her quick thinking ensuring he didn't recover. The rest of the gang began to retreat, realizing this town would not yield easily. Jack's rifle and Evie's clever tactics created a barrier stronger than any gun or brute force. The outlaws hesitated, fear replacing arrogance, and slowly, they fell back to the hills, reassessing their failed plan. The town exhaled collectively, relief washing over everyone. Dust rose from the square as the defeated riders retreated, leaving a quiet that felt heavy after the storm of action. Jack lowered his rifle, allowing the town to absorb the end of the confrontation. Evie's eyes sparkled, reflecting both respect and excitement. "You handled that beautifully," she said, her voice warm. "Your rifle. It's more than just power. It's control, precision, and strategy." Jack allowed himself a small smile. "Skill is only part of it. Timing matters as much as power, and it helps to have an ally who can think on their feet." Evie tilted her head, curiosity and intrigue evident. "I'm Evie Monroe. I travel to find people with courage and intelligence, those who can match wits and action in the wildest conditions. You've passed my first test." Jack raised an eyebrow, interest piqued. "First test?" "Yes," Evie replied. "I'm looking for someone who combines skill, courage, and cleverness. Someone who can handle danger without panic and think ahead. That's rare out here." Jack chuckled softly. "Well, I've always believed that preparation and calmness are more useful than recklessness." The townsfolk, having regained their composure, began to approach cautiously, offering gratitude and admiration. They spoke of bravery, quick thinking, and the remarkable rifle that had kept the town safe. Children peeked curiously, imagining the excitement they had just witnessed. Merchants smiled, their businesses intact, grateful for the heroes who had appeared when danger threatened. Evie turned to Jack, her expression serious but inviting. "I have more adventures ahead," she said. "Inventions, challenges, and mysteries across the frontier. I could use someone like you, if you're willing." Jack considered her words. He had spent his life wandering the West, testing skill, courage, and wit. A chance to explore, to meet challenges with someone equally sharp-minded, stirred a new excitement within him. "I'm interested," he said finally, "but only if we face them together as partners." Evie smiled, satisfaction in her eyes. "Agreed. We'll plan, we'll strategize, and we'll handle whatever comes our way." The sun began to descend, casting long shadows across Dusty Creek. The day's tension melted into calm, leaving a sense of hope and possibility. Jack slung his rifle over his shoulder once more, this time with a lighter heart, knowing that the coming adventures would be shared, not faced alone. The townsfolk lingered, telling each other the story of the cowboy with the rifle that grew twice its fire, and the clever woman who had recognized his skill. Rumors spread quickly, but this time the story was true. The legend of Jack McAllister and Evie Monroe began here, not just for what they had done, but for what they would do next. Night approached, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple. The town's buildings cast long shadows, and the wind whispered gently through the streets. Jack and Evie sat briefly on the steps of the saloon, sharing a quiet moment before new adventures awaited. "You know," Evie said, "most people wouldn't have seen the value in that rifle. They'd have only seen a weapon, but you understood timing, precision, and restraint. That's what makes you special." Jack looked out over the town, a small smile playing at his lips. "And you?" "Most would have panicked when the outlaws charged. You stayed calm, thought clearly, and helped everyone. That's rare too." They shared a brief laugh, a sound that echoed lightly in the quiet street. Both knew the frontier was unpredictable, dangerous, and full of surprises, but they also knew that with courage, intelligence, and the right partner, even the wildest challenges could be faced and overcome. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Jack and Evie stood ready to ride toward their next adventure. The town would remember this day, not just for the bravery shown, but for the partnership that had formed. A cowboy and a clever woman, facing the wild, the unknown, and the extraordinary together. And somewhere in the distance, the hills whispered of more challenges, more excitement, and more opportunities for the rifle that grew twice its fire, and the woman who recognized its true worth. Jack adjusted the strap of his rifle and turned to Evie. "Ready?" Evie smiled, her eyes shining with determination. Always. Together they mounted their horses and rode into the horizon, leaving Dusty Creek behind, but carrying its story with them. The frontier awaited, full of danger, mystery, and the promise of legendary tales yet to be written. The wind carried their figures across the open plains, the dust rising behind them like a trail of glory. And in the hearts of those who had witnessed the day's events, the memory of courage, skill, and partnership would live on forever.